Okay, in the last session, we covered the buy-side activities. For a quick recap for people who may not have attended that session, we basically picked up on the rationale for a client or a company to get into an acquisition mode. Right from defining why they want to acquire a business, whether it is getting into a new market, getting into a new product line, driving synergies from expertise from other businesses that they take over, technological advancement, or various other aspects which are more suited for the company and as internally discussed in their stakeholder meetings. And from there on, defining the need to basically looking at potential targets in the market, reaching out to them, and conducting financial due diligences, evaluating the businesses, determining whether there is adjustment that is required to initial purchase price that were determined when they were pursuing a business, and then finally closing on a deal through an SPA, which is a sale and purchase agreement, and then consolidating the business so that the operations of the two businesses post the closing of a transaction are not disrupted, customers are not impacted, and making sure everything is run smoothly post acquisition. So those were the activities that we discussed the last time. Today we will be talking about the sell side of things, basically the activities that happen from the other side when a client is basically coming into the market to sell or find potential buyers for themselves. Like last time, I would want this session to be interactive and would encourage participation from you all. So as I begin, I would like to understand from you, why does a client want to sell themselves? What can be the rationale for a sale of a business? Anyone who wants to share their thoughts can raise hand, or can just unmute themselves and speak.
Probably they are looking for investment in other business sectors, or they are cash crunch, or they don't have money for expansion.
Yeah, investment in other business will be from a buy side, but yeah, to your second point, that's very valid. They want money, and that's one of the reasons for sale.
Yeah.
What else?
That can be the initial motive of the seller. When he started the business, he must have an exit plan, and that's where he is in the market right now. And looking at the economics and dynamics, he wants to sell the business right now. So that may be one of the reasons.
Sure. Any other reasons? No one. How about retirement? In many cases, when you look at medium-sized businesses, those are owner-operated companies, and the owner has run the business for 40 years, and now they want to retire, and as such, they are looking to sell. That can be one of the reasons, right, to initiate a sale. There can be various other reasons. One reason was raising money. They want to raise funds to carry on various activities that they have pursued for the business, and they go into the market, raise a certain stake from private equities and various other investors, and that gives them the liquidity to actually pursue their growth prospects. They may be looking for a strategic partner who can be best suited to take over the company in the future, who meets their investment criteria, and who can be a good business, which they feel will be running the business once they sell the business, and grow the business as well. And it ensures that there won't be any operational issues because they've found the right investor. So a strategic partner can also be, a choice for a seller, or the need for a seller to get into that mode. In many cases, the seller does not want to sell the whole business, but they have various divisions of a company, and they may want to focus on their core business domain. And as such, they go into the market to sell non-core assets. So that basically is also a carve out of certain of their divisions, and that's also a strategy that many sellers adopt when they go into that divestiture mode. So yeah, I think just like the buy side, from the sell side of things as well, there should be a clear rationale before a client embarks on a sale journey, and that should be well documented, discussed with the stakeholders, and approvals should be obtained before they go into that path. The next step to that is inviting iBankers for pitch. Just like when you go about selling a business, you need financial advisors to help you with the sale. The process basically is investment bankers or financial advisors uh, who want to pursue advising the client with pitch to them. A pitch document is nothing but uh, market uh, a marketing document presented by those firms that highlight their advisory services, and based on that they are selected to become the sell side advisors. Um, you would have uh, you know remembered the discussion when I talked about the role that IBs or financial advisors play in an M&A. So clearly, finding prospective targets for their clients, acting as trusted partner, delivering strategic advice on financial and other matters, evaluating the worth of a transaction, and making sure uh, that a transaction is concluded at a fair price. Those are certain activities that financial advisors do. The last time there was a question that was being raised around why or who can act as a financial advisor in the process, or an intermediary in the process. Clearly there are big investment banks, but there are smaller boutique consulting firms who act in those roles. In addition to that, there are arms of big four firms or large consulting firms who basically uh, have investment banking capabilities, and they basically in consortium with other service providers with would be assisting clients on an M&A. So yeah, so that's the investment bankers, and that's where they come in. I think the last time we discussed certain examples of real life scenarios of companies that were bought and why those decisions were made. One of the questions that came over the last time was around 7-Eleven transaction. I did some research on that, and I don't know if you follow that news, but 7-Eleven is a Japanese convenience store chain. It's one of the largest convenience store chains in that market, and has operations in the US as well. That has been pursued by Alimentation Couche-Tard, a Canadian company, which is listed and operates Circle K stores, which are fuel and convenience stores. You would have seen that while traveling. Um, that company is looking to acquire 7-Eleven stores, and they had initially bid for around $36 billion in August to acquire that business. That deal is still being pursued, and the offer as it stands has been updated by the Canadian company to around $47 billion. Right now in October, they revised that offer, and the reason for that was clearly, the asset or the company 7-Eleven has gotten a lot of interest from this company, and they have uh, they have actually bid 3 times. So they tried to acquire this business in 2005, it failed. They put in a bid in 2020, that failed, and these are the recent conversations in 2024 uh, that are happening right now. The reason for the sale for that business is primarily because the company is not performing at par. There is underperformance in the business. The management is not taking decisions effectively to address the challenges that the business is facing, and there is a growing unrest internally. But the asset is still, or the company is still very attractive, and in order to raise the price from that $35 billion to $47 billion, in between there was a management takeover news that was in the papers. uh, some things like that basically are tactics to drive prices or the potential purchase price, and we do not know how this deal will unfold, but clearly if it happens, it would be the biggest acquisition or a foreign acquisition of a Japanese company if that happens. As you know, Japan is more known for their protectionism kind of policies, and let's see how and where that deal goes. But it would be a good acquisition from the perspective of Circle K owner who is pursuing this for 20 years now. Another reason for companies getting into sale is I can quote Nestlé's example. Uh, I don't know how many of you know Nestlé, who's mostly a food and nutrition brand with chocolates and various other things that they sell. Also had a skin healthcare division in Switzerland, uh, and that was a non-core asset for them. Nestle sold that division in 2019 for around $11 billion to Abu Dhabi Investment Authority and Equity. It was a consortium that made that purchase. But essentially, why that sale happened was to the point that we were discussing earlier. They wanted to focus on the food business, wanted to focus on their nutritional health and beverage segment, which they are good at. And as such, skin health wasn't contributing too much to their overall business. It was 5% of their overall business, and they got rid of that and focused on their core assets. So yeah, moving ahead with the examples now, I think now that we have investment bankers identified, what is the next step that investment bankers or the financial advisors along with the client will get into? Clearly, they would, start the market outreach program, or they will start identifying the buyers who are there in the market. Let's take an example to go with this step. Suppose there is, and imagine there is a US-based cleaning service business, very simplistic business, which is into cleaning services. Do professional cleaning for buildings, have contracts with the commercial property managers who want cleaning of buildings, offices, carpets, windows, everything, right? And this company has been run for 40 years by their owner, and now they want to retire and they want to sell this business. Now, they reached out to an investment banker or a financial advisor to represent them into the market and find them a good buyer who can take over the business and continue to grow the business post their exit. Now, this financial advisor will essentially start with reaching out to potential buyers who meet their investment criteria. And generally, it's not just one buyer that a seller interacts with. In many cases, they would interact with multiple buyers and then choose one buyer. But the journey starts, from identification of buyers who are in the same industry, of the same size, have the same core values, or from a seller's perspective, are the best possible, businesses who can take over their business and run it efficiently and continue to keep it profitable and in the market, right? In their pursuit, the financial advisors will reach out to strategic buyers, that is companies who are in the same industries. In many cases, they may reach out to financial firms like private equity firms who have a specific portfolio where they are doing add-on acquisitions of companies in similar industry, and they have a vision to grow the company, grow the valuation, and basis who they approach, they will go about that. So this step obviously involves multiple steps and multiple high-level strategic conversations and follow-ups with potential buyers, and it requires them or financial advisors along with the sellers to prepare deal marketing documents that are circulated with the buyers. Now, those deal marketing documents can be a teaser or SIM, which is a confidential information memorandum. Anyone who knows what a teaser is? Okay, so a teaser is nothing but a very simplistic one-pager or maximum 5 to 10-pager document which does not name the company. The purpose of the teaser is to generate interest in the business, in the market. It is sent to potential buyers. It does not, obviously, as I said, no name is disclosed. It basically contains very high-level overview of the business, basic information on financials, key acquisition considerations, and what are the growth opportunities from buying such a company, which is into cleaning services. A sim sim follows a teaser. So teaser is sent before a sim is released. So sim is sent to potential buyers, and based on the buyer's interest, a sim is circulated to them under a non-disclosure agreement. A sim is a more lengthy document. It has a comprehensive overview of the business, its history, operations, growth potential, financials, everything. It discloses the name of the company that is being planned to sell, to be sold as well. What is a NDA? I think we discussed that the last time. Can someone just share what they know about what a NDA is?
There's a non-disclosure agreement, like to whomsoever with the information is being shared with, like it won't go public, or it will remain with certain people, or whomsoever have been mentioned in NDA.
Yeah, well said, Udit. It's a legally binding document, a contract that contains confidential information that is shared between buyer and seller during a transaction. What is confidential information? Can be customer information, supplier information, employee information, news about new product launches of the company. And that's why it becomes important that such information is kept confidential. And only when a buyer or a potential buyer signs that is when a SIM is shared with them to evaluate the business further and be more informed about the company that they are getting into. There is always this negotiation between the buyer and seller around the term of NDA. The buyer would want the term of the NDA to be kept minimum, while the seller, for obvious reasons, will want it to be for a higher tenure because they don't want the news to go in the market and information to be leaked, or the buyer discussing about the company in the market with others. But a typical term for an NDA can range anywhere from 1 year to 3 years. So in addition to the SIM, the teasers, often clients undertake a vendor due diligence, a VDD. A VDD basically, or before I kind of just get into that, can someone just tell me what a VDD is? High level understanding of what a vendor due diligence is.
Again, it's about the looking to the vendor's financial from very high level to whatever they have mentioned is correct or not. Or before going into in a very much depth to what are the operating or non-operating, what are the expenses, that whatever they have given. Just a very high level overview.
Thanks, so that you've been the one who is keeping it alive. I want others to pitch in as well. Is there anyone else as well who wants to share?
Ashfaq? I'm not sure, like
So,
Ashfaq, Chirag, yeah. Yep.
You're picking people, is it?
Yeah.
so basically, from a due diligence perspective, they just want to make sure that working capital flows from vendor perspective and the cash flow is managed properly. That can go up to vendor due diligence, up to can go up to long-term loan facility or a short-term loan facility. That can go up to OD facilities as well. So that's a high-level due diligence from a cash flow perspective to arrive at a number that, okay, the cash number or anything which has been disclosed in the initial financials are the closing financials are good enough.
Okay. Now this is a good overview of a due diligence. From a vendor side, it's slightly different. So it's basically a financial review of a company which was performed on behalf of the seller. So typically, a accounting firm, a third-party accounting firm, or a boutique consulting firm like us, obviously, no kidding, this is not marketing, but generally a third-party firm which does not have vested interest or does not have a conflict of interest is hired to perform a sell-side due diligence or a vendor due diligence. Now, that report essentially contains the financial performance of the business on historical basis. It gives a view on what the quality of earnings look like, what the working capital looks like, and then various other customer, supplier, and other matters of the company which are relevant for the buyers to make a call or be more informed about the business. Since the provider who prepares the report will also provide an opinion on their findings, a potential buyer, and why it becomes a VDD becomes important is a potential buyer can then rely on this information as the process moves forward. It helps also the seller to be more prepared and anticipate buyers' questions and know potential areas of negotiation later in the process. Um, it's also useful as it is issued often in a bidding scenario where multiple bidders are involved or looking for the same target company. As it is, having more bidders means more buyers and more certainty of closing a transaction from a seller's perspective. And that's why they get into doing a VDD or sell side due diligence. Um, the next step or another step, I would say, in the planning phase is assembling the data room. What is a data room? A data room basically is maybe a physical data room that used to be back in the day. Since COVID, things have changed, things have become virtual. Not that virtual didn't existed, but a data room essentially is a place where all the financial, legal, and operational data of a target company or a seller is shared with respective parties uh, who are looking to buy the business and their financial advisors. Now, often, as part of preparation for the sale, companies require assistance in creating, organizing documents, preparing financials. A lot of private companies, small businesses or medium-sized businesses do not have sophisticated systems. They are not sellers are never into a M&A mode, or they haven't sold the business, never thought about that historically, and suddenly they are into a phase where they are looking to sell. Clearly they need to organize the documents, they need to know about their business as well. And for that, a vendor assist kind of an engagement is given to third parties, again, accounting firm, boutique consulting firm, which also involves assembling the documents and structuring these documents to be shared with potential buyers through a data room. Apart from that, we discussed about the NDA, negotiation around the NDA, and what it takes to get into the next step of evaluation of a deal, which starts from IOI. Now, we discussed IOI the last time, so I'm hoping for those of you who attended the last session, what IOI is. Anyone who can just share what an IOI is? Okay, I'll probably take
Yes.
that up. Uh, so IOI is the full form of it is indication of interest. It's a formal but non-binding document submitted by buyers who have actually read the SIM that was shared with them earlier, and they want to know more about the business and may ultimately consider putting an offer for this company that they are looking into. Once an IOI is received by the seller and their investment bankers, uh, they will select which buyer they would want to advance to the next phase of the deal. which will involve getting management presentations, getting access to some data room documents, and also limited site visits of the seller's facilities. Um, the next step basically is, as I said, getting into the LOI. And an LOI is the term sheet, or basically a more formal document which includes the final purchase price, or I would say somewhat more concrete purchase price than was in the IOI. In the IOI, you typically do not conclude what the purchase price for the business will be. You will give a range that I'll acquire this business from, say, $30 million to $35 million. And LOI is slightly more, closer to reality, and it suggests what the purchase price or initial purchase price would be. Apart from that, it will have the terms of the deal, which will eventually go into the sale and purchase agreement, should there be one executed between the buyer and the seller. It will have a structuring of the deal as to how the buyer will finance the deal, how they will generate the finances, and how the equity structure will look like. It will have an exclusivity period, which means that during that period, the seller will not be engaging with any other buyer. And during that time, the buyer will be getting access to more information about the seller to evaluate and conduct financial, tax, legal, HR, IT, and other due diligences. In an LOI, typically what happens when a LOI is signed is, as part of the terms, a portion of a purchase price is deposited in an escrow account, which is kind of a deposit, or kind of a initial deposit towards the purchase price. And subject to due diligences during the exclusivity period, the buyer needs to come back to the seller and their advisors to confirm whether they are going ahead with the deal or not. If they are going ahead with the deal, clearly, they will go to the next step and, execute the deal. But if they are not going ahead with the deal and the buyer did not convey that decision during that exclusivity period, there is a clause in many LOIs which says that that deposit amount that they paid will be forfeited by the seller. So the seller has the right to keep that deposit. So the buyers need to make sure that whatever exclusivity period they are getting, they need to conduct all the diligences and be comfortable about the acquisition that they are getting into, and be able to convey that decision before that timeline, so they do not lose out on the deposit that they paid. So a typical exclusivity period for a deal is around 45 days to 90 days. And as I said, that's the time which is very, very critical from the perspective of both the seller and buyer to be on top of various aspects that will unfold with various due diligences that will happen. So the last bullet point that you see is the confirmatory or final due diligence. We discussed various due diligences the last time, so I'll take you to the next to the last slide, the buy side activity slide, which talks about the various diligences that can happen on the seller's financials, on the seller's tax profile, seller's documentation around legal, operations, commercial, HR, and IT. Now, every diligence is important because from a buyer's perspective, they want to be comfortable on various aspects, which are not just financial, but also taking care of the other matters. But a financial due diligence holds significance because essentially you are getting to look at the historical numbers, the key drivers of the revenues of the company, the margins of the company, what kind of relationships they have, or with the customers. Do they have contracts with the customers, and what the underlying earnings of the business look like once the business is taken over, what will be the working capital or operating cash requirements on a month-on-month basis, on day 1, day 30, day 90, and so on and so forth. So they want to be having all the information to their remit from a buyer's perspective, and it becomes important from a seller's perspective to be well prepared to assist the buyer in that due diligence. It's in the interest of both the parties to disclose the facts as they stand, because they do not want to go to the court at a later stage. And I will come to the SPA in a bit, but it is in the interest of the sellers to disclose the information as it stands, so that the deal goes on smoothly as it proceeds forward. So I'll move on to the final due diligence. So once the seller has got their data room, the access is given to the buyers and their respective parties to conduct the due diligence. And by that stage, as I said earlier, they are potentially, in many cases, they're only working with one buyer, but there may be multiple buyers who may be conducting due diligence on the company, depending on where things stand. So sellers often need to organize themselves in a way that they are able to address the needs of various buyers. Clearly, when they are dealing with one particular buyer, they cannot, they are bound by the exclusivity, and as such, during that exclusivity, they cannot discuss the deal with another potential buyer. But they would be going through the phases where they would be dealing with multiple buyers and addressing their request, and the process can be very strenuous. So they need to have the right team with the right skill sets and also the right advisors to make sure that they get the right support in the sale process as they embark on that journey and speak to various parties. So once all the financial due diligences, other due diligences are done, the final negotiation happens. And for this, I would just quickly take you to a slide we discussed the last time. Essentially, once an headline price or initial purchase price is agreed for the business basis, the valuation techniques we discussed, which can be a multiple of EBITDA or a DCF approach, the discounted cash flow techniques, that valuation becomes the initial purchase price of the company, subject, net of the debt in the business, because that is retained by the seller, and they will settle the debt less cash. So that initial purchase price becomes the base on which potential negotiations may happen, subject to due diligences that we just talked about in the evaluation phase. Now, assume that for this seller, which is into the cleaning services business, the initial purchase price was determined at a valuation of 1 million, whatever way or method they took, whether it was P multiple or DCF, and they had a net debt of 200. So the initial purchase price was around 800,000. And during the due diligence, they noted that the initial EBITDA of the company, or the reported EBITDA of the company, was overstated, or needed to be adjusted slightly. So for example, if this 1 million was 500 times 2, or the reported EBITDA was 500,000, and the multiple at which the business was valued was 2, and due diligence led to an adjustment in the EBITDA to the extent of 50,000. And that meant that the EBITDA of the company was not 500, the adjusted EBITDA were 450. The initial purchase price, or the headline price, then gets revised from 1 million to 900. And that is one negotiating point between the buyer and the seller, as to that purchase price is now going to be adjusted to the extent of 100,000 that they found out through the EBITDA. The another consideration for typically for deals is doing a working capital adjustment, and that happens during the closing. And I'll just talk about that slightly later in the process. But once we have a final negotiation, that purchase price is agreed on, the SPA is signed, the deal is closed. And what is an SPA? I think we discussed that the last time, but SPA is nothing but a binding document between the buyer and seller, which describes the terms of the deal, the asset being purchased or the company being purchased, the entities that are being purchased, how much of the purchase price is paid through cash, what is the structure of the deal, and what is included in the deal, what is excluded from the deal, all those representations from the sellers about the business, the way it has been conducted historically, warranties, indemnities from the seller side, that the business is being conducted, or various things that uh, have happened during the historical period. The seller takes responsibility if there is a litigation on the operations of the business, that's being covered through the indemnities that the seller offers in that sale and purchase agreement. It's all documented. One of the clauses in the sale and purchase agreement is a closing working capital adjustment. Now, what happens typically in a completion mechanics, and we talked about slightly about that the last time, in North America, mostly in India, completion mechanics are completion mechanics or completion accounts are prepared to close deal, as opposed to Europe, where lockbox mechanism is used. In a completion mechanics, which is more relevant for our purposes, uh, the purchase price gets to further get adjusted for any changes in working capital at the time of closing. And that closing can be any time when the business is being taken over, or maybe it may take place at a predetermined date, which is documented in the sale and purchase agreement. What it essentially does is, say the due diligence was done on 30th June, and on 30th June, the working capital for that company, or the requirement of working capital for that company was determined at, say, 100,000. Now, when the actual close happened, that actually business was sold on 30th September. So there is a completion accounts that are prepared on 30th September to know what the working capital is, and obviously to prepare opening balance sheets and various other purposes. But one of the considerations is to look at whether the business has been run in the normal course, or has there been any significant changes in the working capital uh, at the time of closing. And if the determined working capital or the target working capital that we had at 100,000 at June gets to change to, say, 50,000, which means that maybe the seller sold accounts receivables at a discount and collected money, and the working capital goes down. Essentially, what it means is, when the buyer takes over the company, they will have to infuse those funds to make sure that the working capital requirements of the business are met, because eventually they need 100,000 to run this business, and now they're not getting 100,000, they're only getting 50,000. So to compensate the buyer, there is a working capital adjustment that happens in the closing to the extent of the difference between the target working capital during due diligence and the closing working capital, which in this case comes to 50,000. The eventual purchase price gets further adjusted by that 50,000. So that's one of the adjustments that happens at the closing phase, that again further changes some of the dynamics in the purchase price. Once all that is done, the next step obviously here, and which is very, very crucial here, is the realization. And the realization is not just from the perspective of the seller, or not just from the perspective of the buyer, but it's also from the perspective of the seller. Clearly, the seller's business is getting integrated into the buyer's business. Now, on day one, it becomes very, very important that uh, the business that is being sold or transferred is running smoothly. That is, the sold business still have operations that they are running. They're making sales. They have customers there that are coming to them. They are employees that need to work. So every possible communication that needs to be made all that planning basically goes through parallelly to make sure that on day one, the businesses are, or the two businesses do not have any disruption. And management consultants are hired to make sure in the first 3 months of the transition, all the steps that need to be done to integrate the functions and departments of the two businesses, they are done in a very smooth, very professional and organized manner. In addition to that, uh, there may be a need to prepare carve out financials, as I talked about earlier. Uh, if it's sale of a non-core division of a company, that needs to be carved out so that only the performance of that particular business is being monitored and evaluated, and carve out financial statements are prepared and made sure that uh, you know there is adequate information to know how the business is performing, or how the business gets run in the future, and that base is needed. So those are certain things which, again, accountants do, and management consultants who are on the uh, strategy side or commercial side, basically, or various other streams will be brought into picture to do that. So these are some of the steps, that happen on the sell side of things. Um, we discussed, another important aspect of from the IndoCanada professionals community who is attending this, where in each step of an M&A journey, uh, we can explore a career, or someone who is interested in building a career in this role can get into it. As discussed the last time, clearly, from a financial perspective, it's typically the CPAs, chartered accountants, CFAs, MBA finance. Those are certain prerequisites for it, but there's not just that financial component to an M&A. There are legal components to it. There are research components to it. There is a strategy component to it. There's tax component to it, technology component to it, HR component to it. So as I talked about, various streams get involved and bring in their niche and their experience at any step of the journey. So someone who is interested in this field, depending on where they are in their journey, can basically choose to first obviously identify which stream is most suited to build a career in that role, and accordingly gain experience by getting into a firm which has that as a service offering in their company. So clearly, I've just laid out potential areas and roles at each step, right from identifying the need for a deal to realization. So from a perspective of the first step, when the client is just coming into the market or preparing themselves for a sale, investment bankers, financial advisors, or big four firms who have those teams basically uh, pitch in, and people there basically get mobilized to start working on helping the seller. Clearly, a lot of research is required to identify potential buyers in the market, know more about the company that they are looking to sell into, and not all the information is public sometimes. So a lot of research tools are required, accesses are required, and a lot of experience is required to be able to produce the right research, uh, understand the market, understand the industry, what are the growth prospects in the industry, what is the future outlook looking like, and how does the company fit into the whole scenario. Requires a lot of research and very specific knowledge around that. So these research professionals also have a role to play in this particular step. As we move on to the planning, evaluation, negotiation phases, clearly, all the fields, right from strategy consulting firms or people working in strategy firms, boutique consulting firms, legal to draft documentations around NDA, LOI, IOI, SPA, all those things, financial due diligence folks or investment banking folks to prepare deal marketing documents, conducting vendor due diligences, buy side due diligences, financial, IT, HR, those are involved as well. Accountants are also required to prepare financials. In many cases, as I said earlier, sellers are not as ready, when they actually take that step. For many people or for many entrepreneurs, it's their first sale. So they need a lot of hand holding, and a good accountant is often the need, or good CFO, fractional CFO is often the need, who can help them navigate various challenges as they go about that journey. And that's also a good career to get into. Obviously, it requires experience. It doesn't happen day one, but someone who is interested in any of these activities need to get into it as early in their careers as possible, and then grow into that smoothly. Last step, realization. Clearly, as I mentioned, integration and separation teams in big four firms, large consulting firms often are brought in to do that. Often it becomes a cross-selling, for them as well, because they may have their own teams who may have assisted the client in doing diligences or various other streams earlier. Accounting teams, obviously technical accounting teams within consulting firms or folks who do technical accounting also pitch in to prepare carved out financials and help with transitioning. There may be a situation where the seller is US listed or it's based in US, maybe a private company, and the buyer is Canadian. The buyer is European or buyer is Indian. And obviously, with that integration, a US GAAP versus transitioning to a IFRS requires technical accounting support as to what and how revenue will be impacted, profit will be impacted, balance sheet will be impacted with change in GAAP of the two companies, or merging the GAAP into the two companies. So clearly, technical accountants are also key on this crucial step in the M&A journey. So yeah, I think as it stands, a lot of expertise and a lot of steps go into conducting M&A. We discussed the buy side of things the last time. We have completed the circle by covering the sell side of things this time. Hopefully, this is a good overview for everyone on a very high level. We try to get into the technicalities, but I'm sure that there may be questions. If there are any questions, please feel free to ask me right now. I'm also available anytime later if you want to have a one-on-one conversation. But right now, if there is any question, please let me know.
Any questions? You can just unmute yourself. If you have any career-related questions or any technical questions for Kapil to ask.
Hey, Kapil, thanks for that. Very helpful. Just a quick question on the purchase price. So it has been seen, it's quite often now that if the seller is getting into any due diligence, mainly it's into the legal due diligence or a high level financial due diligence or tax, it would be. They usually utilize the company's money, which is the acquiring company. So can that cost be part of the purchase price adjustment as part of the working capital adjustment, or that can be included to the side later or something during an SPA?
Can you give me an example when you say they use seller's money, or what does that mean? Sorry.
So the teaser has been shared. The seller is in the final stage. The SPA is about to be signed. Before the SPA, usually the seller get into the due diligence process, right? The buyer is already in. They are into the financial, legal, tax, whatever that may be. A lot of things, right? From seller perspective, usually they don't go into much, but they do make sure that from a legal perspective, the company, the structuring and everything is good enough. They have a financial capacity to pay us on time, right? That cost, which is itself is very minimal, but usually they pay out from the company. That can be in advances, that can affect the working capital, right? That in a sense is usually not part of the SPA, but that money has already been utilized on before the date of acquisition.
So you mean the transaction related expenses for seller, right?
The transaction cost, the entire transaction cost pertaining to seller.
Yeah, so mostly the transaction related expenses, that is any transactions any expenses they incur towards the transaction, say hiring legal guys to draft SPA or various other things through the process, or investment bankers or accountants, etc. All that transaction related expenses to help them with the sale essentially is the responsibility of the seller. And what happens is during the evaluation of the purchase price, we discuss the net debt. There is a net debt analysis that is done, and that basically the transaction related expense is considered as a net debt item. So if there is any liability towards accountants, etc., that is adjusted from the purchase price because it's the responsibility of the sellers. It may be a negotiating point sometimes, so it is shared, but most of the cases, it's essentially the sellers to take that.
Yeah, so that can be part of the purchase price adjustments, right?
That's correct. That is
Okay.
mostly a default net debt item, which is adjusted from the eventual purchase price.
Makes sense. Thank you.
So,
Thank you.
so you see the
Oh.
slide here with the net debt of 200. That basically includes that transaction related liability, expense liability.
Yeah.
So any other question
Irrespective
for
of
Kapil? Sorry.
what kind of model is followed, right? Whether that's some EBITDA multiple or that's a DCF, right? That doesn't matter, right?
Yeah, so in many cases, because most of the industries, there is a know-how around how the last deals happened or the recent transactions happened and what multiples were they to the EBITDA. Often buyers already are in know of the going multiples. So they would, they would use the initial financials and the discussions with the sellers to determine the purchase price, which often happens to be the reported EBITDA times or the EBITDA, which is adjusted for sellers' discretionary earnings in a smaller business, times the multiple. And that becomes the base. Obviously, it is further subject to adjustment, but that's what it is. But many cases, there is a proper financial model which is prepared by financial modelers using the DCF approach, and that gets used to determine the value of the company.
Perfect. Thank you.
Any other questions for Kapil? So Kapil, I'm having a couple of questions.
Yeah.
Like I'm just a freshly, like for example, like hypothetically, if I'm a fresh chartered accountant, I've just cleared my CA or a CPA. If I want to start with my career in M&A, if I have to pitch for a company, first of all, where should I head to? What are the higher chances? How can I maximize my chances to get started or to get me hired? And what could be the potential? It's an industry, or it's only a big fours or a big six, or there are other firms. If you can name some of them for everyone, will be helpful.
Yeah.
For completely
Of course,
freshers. Yeah.
no, very good question, Udit, and quite it resonates with me as well for people who are getting into this or wants to explore a career. So for anyone who is recently qualified CPA and early into their career journey and enjoys the kick that consulting gives, should definitely explore joining one of these large consulting firms. And while Big Fours obviously have larger teams and bigger transactions. It's not just those big fours, but there are big eights as well. So any top 10 big consulting firms that have all the streams or teams to do various activities related to deal advisory work, those are the teams that they should plan to apply into. So many consulting firms have audit, tax, advisory, and within advisory, there is management consulting, there is risk consulting, there is deal advisory team, which is more related to M&A. And within that, there are various specific niches like financial due diligence, tax due diligence, integration, separation, etc. There are management consulting teams as well, which do some bit of M&A assistance work or strategy kind of work that they can plan to get into if that is their choice, financial transformation, etc. kind of work in M&A scenario. So those are the teams I would suggest people who want to explore a career in M&A should get into. On the alternate side of the industry a larger company which has an in-house team which does M&A and does a lot of corporate development kind of work can be also choices for people to get into, because while it's not a consulting firm, but because if by virtue of the company being very acquisitive and they are more focused on inorganic growth, which means growth through acquisitions or mergers and acquisitions, those companies will also have good exposure for for young for young people who are getting into the industry. Obviously, they will start from scratch, and it requires a lot of patience working in an industry vis-a-vis consulting, because in an industry, the dynamics are very different. You do not work on a 4-week project like you do in a consulting firm and move to another project. It's a project to project in consulting, while in industry, you are pursuing a role for a longer term. And that has its own advantages, because if you pursue an M&A role in an industry which is in a good company, with a company which is in a good industry or a growth industry, that has its own advantages, because you get to learn all the aspects of a transaction rather than only being specific to one aspect of it. In a large consulting firm, there are teams for every particular vertical, as I was talking about. So it's often that you are or your role gets restricted to doing only one part of work. So if someone is doing tax, they will continue to do tax. They won't get exposure on financial. While in an industry, you may be exposed to various things yourself, and that is also a good space to get into, right? And grow in that particular career. And I've seen people who start early can also grow to bigger levels like CFO roles, or large roles in those companies that they start early on. So both have its own advantages and disadvantages. It so happens that by working in a large consulting firm to start with, or accounting firms to start with, it exposes one who is young to various industries, various companies, through travel, through knowing and learning about how work happens, and be slightly more organized about their approach, which can be used as a platform to pivot to industry roles of their choice. So that's what I've seen a lot of people also taking.
Is there any course or any book which you suggest a person can read to increase to increase his or her chances to get selected as a candidate? I personally believe, like, no, nothing specific, to be in very in general, like when I cleared my CA. So like what I have seen in all my friends, like M&A has been a very prestigious field, and
Yeah.
then comes tax, then the third choice is like always audit. So this is the M&A is always on the top. So
Yeah.
how to increase their chances in the interview? Like, is there any course or any book or what a person shall be doing to outstand with the other candidates?
Yeah, lots of things, because there are a lot of niche steps in the journey of an M&A, and every step requires an expertise of its own. So if you are someone who is into financial modeling, you need to learn about how models are prepared, how valuation is done. If you are into financial due diligences, you need to be on top of technical accounting, understanding financials, understanding balance sheets and profitability, and so on and so forth. But when you're starting small, or when you are building up your career, it is very good to have hands-on knowledge on very basic things like Excel, PowerPoint. You need to be very good at the basics to start with, and depending on which role you take, you may need relevant trainings on that particular domain. So to my point, as I talked about technical accounting, you need to know debit and credit pretty well. And for that, if there are any specific books you need to read, or trainings you need to take, you need to go through that. If you're doing modeling, then you need to be on top of how models are prepared. If you are into valuation, then you need to understand the various techniques, how DCF is done, how some of the other valuation techniques work. Similarly, if you are into strategy and management consulting side of things, then you need to obviously have some bit of domain knowledge there, but also a lot of these new AI and new generational tools that process data from raw information in a very meaningful format in a very quick manner. You need to know and understand some of those, like Tableau, like Alteryx, some of these process flow tools that are involved. You need to have knowledge around that. If you are into forecasting, then you need to have knowledge around various tools like R, which kind of helps you do that. And there are various other techniques, like you need to know Power BI and so on and so forth to be able to present your thoughts as well in those teams. In my days in Accenture, I had some bit of exposure to some of those tools, and I saw that that was what young or people who were coming into the company as the freshers were mostly asked to do.
Okay, awesome. And Kapil, like what I have seen, like in tax, if you're in tax, if you're in audit, you can do your own practice. So like you have been doing in M&A. I just want to check like what are the possibilities after if anybody want to leave his or her job in M&A. So what are the possibilities and what's the scope in business or as a accountant into his own business or into their own practice?
Yeah, I think clearly it's a personal choice, but what I feel is that once one should take that step only when they have got good exposure and experience to various kind of deals, various kind of scenarios that they have advised on, if they have been a part of on projects that they have done. Because when you take that big step of moving away from a job and starting your own practice, be it any field, you would need a strong execution experience, because that's on the back of which you are getting into that mode. And you cannot rely on anyone at that time. You will not have support like you have when you are in a job. There is a team working and you have support there. You have experienced people who help you. You have juniors to do your work in a journey from a job to your own. It requires a lot of calculated steps, and often it's a risky step as well. So you need to have that patience. But I think the strong foundation is on the back of experience. If you have that experience, then I would suggest you go into that step. And until you are at that stage, you should refrain from taking that step.
Awesome. Any other questions, anyone? Thank you. Thank you. So thank
Perfect.
you.